Some people consider it more close to historical accuracy. It's controversial. Practically any word Stuart Lake wrote is controversial. But he does have in his famous book, Wyatt Earp Frontier Marshal, a listing of men who rode the cattle trail into Kansas, and it's worthy of repeating here. I think it's very interesting. This is what Stuart and Lake had provided in his biography: a partial roster of gunmen who made headquarters in Dodge City during the summer of 1877. Among them were Bob Robertson, Cal Polk, Bill Moore, Lon Chambers, Lee Hall, Tom Emery, Bob Williams, Louis Bozeman, Jimmy Oglesby, Fred Lay, Tom Monroe, Charlie Coffey, Kingfisher, and John Culp. Professional fighting men for the great cattle outfits, end quote. Now, we can accept that or question it. It'd be interesting for someone to take that list of names, research them, and find out where they were in the summer of 1877. We do recognize most of those names from the history of Tascosa, Texas, and some we recognize as participants in the Lincoln County War. The question remains, was Kingfisher and John Culp among those gunmen who Lake calls a roster of gunmen and working for the great cattle outfits? Maybe so, maybe not. The problem, one of the problems with Kingfisher is there is a paucity of documentation. He did not live in a big city with several newspapers to record actions. He didn't live in Austin or Houston or San Antonio. He lived in the brush country more commonly, Dimmitt County, Uvalde County, and Maverick County, Eagle Pass. And people recognize these as South Texas counties today. Another problem with Kingfisher is, when was he born? We know he was born in Collin County, which is in the northeastern part of Texas, almost in Oklahoma. But we have some problems. Excuse me. O.C. Fisher, a lateral descendant, wrote that he was born in 1854 of humble parentage. His daughter wrote that he was born in October 1855. His great-great-granddaughter said he was born in either 1853 or 1854. On his tombstone, which is in Uvalde at Pioneer Rest Cemetery, it says he was born in 1856. So we are left with 1854 through 1856, which is not a big deal, but as historians, we like to be able to pinpoint birth, place, parentage, and so on. If one considers the dilemma for Billy the Kid researchers, they all have New York and several other places, and yet they cannot determine what year, when, where Billy the Kid was born. And it may be something that no one ever finds out. Now, besides the problem of birth, we also would like to have evidence of his first crime. Not so, because many things of great interest simply did not get recorded. For example, family lore, or legend as you might say, for Kingfisher, would tell us that his first crime was stealing a horse. Supposedly, he was in Williamson County visiting his cousins, and he got tired of riding around, so he got off his horse to take a nap. Logical. However, he forgot to hobble the horse, and while Kingfisher snoozed, the horse wandered away. What did Kingfisher do? Well, he felt where there might be a horse, it'll be easier than walking to find his own horse. So he got a hold of someone's horse there on the range, rode it, and then returned it to where he found it. The horse happened to belong to Andrew Jackson Turnbow, who was the father of a couple of Kingfisher's friends, and he considered the question of charging him with stealing a horse, but thought better of it. Kingfisher was friends with Turnbow's two sons, so he decided to let it go. That was his first accepted crime. The second crime, 1870, turned out differently. He was charged with breaking and entering a general store owned by Mr. Greenlee. He and another boy, Willis Fulcrod, who happened to be a mulatto. The two were later charged with breaking and stealing items from the store, not once, but a week after the first. So, he and Fulcrod were found out, were arrested, stood trial, found guilty, and Kingfisher, whose age is uncertain, but 16, 17, something like that, an elder teenager, was found guilty. Fulcrod was found guilty. He also got charged with assault. And the two were sentenced to serve time in Huntsville. For a youth, spending time in Huntsville was worse than being lost. He had some friends who petitioned Governor Davis that because of his youth, he should not be spending time in prison. The Supreme Court reviewed his case and decided that he may have been found guilty for the first weekend crime. He may have been found guilty for the crime committed a week later. Maybe the jury figured there isn't enough evidence to convict him of one crime, so they considered the two crimes together, which they should not have done, the court determined. So they sent his case for retrial, which never happened, and Governor Davis pardoned him. This is the same governor who, at the same time, had created the Texas State Police, which was an extremely unpopular organization, and some of our noted gunfighters like Ben Thompson, John Wesley Hardin, Bill Longley, Cullen Baker had problems with Texas State Police. So far as known, Kingfisher never had any dealings with the state police. That was Kingfisher's first, not contemporary, of course, but first crime that we have a paper trail for. We have the pardon, we have the convict register, and so on. Now, following this remember, Kingfisher now is going on 20 maybe. 1871, he's out, pardoned out. And he becomes a rancher. Not his own ranch, of course, but working for somebody. And the man he developed a deep friendship for was French Strother Gray White. That was his unusual or different name. But he was called Doc White, as everybody knew him. And Kingfisher wanted to work for Doc White. So he starts his beginnings of his career, and he becomes an expert with handling horses, cattle, and so on. And he becomes expert enough that Doc White and other ranchers actually hire him to help recover stolen horses and cattle from their herds. The idea of recovering stolen cattle, horses, one might say that Kingfisher was part of the group that stole and therefore knew where the stolen property had been put. Or he was just a better sleuth than others. Some range detectives, as they were called, men such as Tom Horn or Frank Canton, were detectives for a while. Let's turn to O.C. Fisher again. He wrote, O.C. Fisher, by the way, wrote the first biography of Kingfisher, published in 1966. He wrote, King broke and trained the best horses obtainable. Irrepressible, he moved about in the shadows of night, chasing Mexican bandits across the river, often retrieving stolen horses and cattle to be returned to their owners. The settlers soon developed a genuine respect and admiration for the youthful cowboy. Well, doing this, Kingfisher ultimately determined that he wanted his own ranch, not working for others, but he'd be his own boss. Now, of course, being a rancher, and this is long before vetting became popular. You took a man at his word. Kingfisher soon developed a group whose background was not admirable. Probably many of the cowboys working for Kingfisher were cattle thieves or gunmen. But as long as they followed Kingfisher's orders, he allowed them to stay with him. Let's move ahead a few years to 1875, 1876. We meet up with a man named Leander H. McNally, who in many ways was similar to Kingfisher. He had spent, in many ways, directly opposite. McNally had spent 4 years as a Confederate. After the war, he was chosen a captain in the Texas State Police. After the state police, he was named a captain of Rangers to break up the Sutton-Taylor feud. In about 1875, 1876, he is named captain of Rangers to be sent to the Rio Grande to fight the cattle thieves, which were decimating the Texas and Mexico ranchers. McNally and Kingfisher did meet. Kingfisher had his ranch, his headquarters, his house. McNally had about 25 or 30 rangers under his command, and one of his goals happened to be arrest Kingfisher, who by now had a reputation not only as a horse and cattle thief, maybe, but also as a man to be respected. King McNally decides he's going to get Kingfisher. And with his men, he determines, as one of his rangers later wrote, at a prearranged moment, all of us dashed for the house at full speed, 6 shooters in hand. A fence was in our way, but the horses went over it like hunters after the hounds. And before Fisher and his men perceived us, we were within 100 yards of his place. Now, here was the opportunity for a gunfight, a battle as famous as the OK Corral or Rock Creek. But Fisher, although he may not have had excellent education in his background, was a smart man and knew better than to resist. Much to the Rangers' disappointment, Fisher and his men calmly, quietly surrendered. They were all delivered to the courtroom at Eagle Pass in Maverick County, where they gave bond and were immediately released. This was big news for McNally. It gave him further attention, as it did Kingfisher. Following the arrest, Kingfisher remained a peaceful rancher. If you would ask him, what are you doing? He would have said, I am taking care of my ranch. He had married, and he ultimately had 3 daughters who survived. So he was becoming a family man and had seen the highway, the better highway than the trail of the outlaw. With his family, he decides to move up, possibly moving up in society, as it were. And he got a house in Uvalde, Texas. He has a wife, his family, all is going well. People have enough respect for him that they consider making him sheriff of Uvalde County. Well, he decides to work as a deputy first, and when, as luck would have it, the current sheriff was indicted for embezzlement and had to leave office, Kingfisher became the acting sheriff of Uvalde County, 1883. This is parallel in some ways to Ben Thompson, who, although having the reputation of a gunfighter, gambler, and drunkard, and so on, was elected city marshal of Austin a few years before. So there are some parallels with Kingfisher and Ben Thompson. 1883, 1884, that period of time, a new type of criminal activity finds its way into the West and all over the West. Fence cutting. Fences cost money, they cost time to establish, and they're easily cut. That way, if you want to steal a few cattle or horses, cut the wires of the fence, and you have them. So this is happening in not only Uvalde County, but in neighboring counties. So the sheriff, Kingfisher, goes to Austin to meet with Governor John Ireland about enforcing the fence cutting laws. And at Austin, he runs into a companion, Ben Thompson. We are now in March 1884. Kingfisher conducts his business with Governor Ireland and with Ben Thompson. They supposedly visit a few saloons in Austin. Ben Thompson drank heavily, but Fisher supposedly didn't touch a drop. And of course, it was getting time to go home for Fisher. He would have to go to San Antonio on the train and then take the train to Uvalde. Ben Thompson wants to go along to meet some people in San Antonio. So the two men are on the train in San Antonio. Once there, they meet up with Billy Thompson, who fortunately is behaving himself at this time. Ben Thompson and Kingfisher attend the theater and observe the play because of the leading actress, Ada Gray. They leave the play and walk over to the Vaudeville Theatre, where by chance or ironically or stupidly, Ben Thompson wants to visit the same theater where 2 years before he had killed Jack Harris, the proprietor. Jack Harris had friends, and the proprietors of the vaudeville had been alerted that Kingfisher and Ben Thompson were coming, so they set up what turned out to be an ambush. On March 11, 1884, Kingfisher and Ben Thompson in the vaudeville are ambushed, murdered by assassins who are never charged with anything. And that takes care of Kingfisher's life. He happened to be with the wrong company at the time. Thompson's body was taken back to Austin, where it was given a tremendous funeral. Kingfisher was taken back to Uvalde, where he was mourned by citizens, buried in the Pioneer Cemetery. That's where he lays today. No one has tried to remove his body and rebury him elsewhere. It has a monument and protected by an iron fence. Thank you.
这时间飞快，又如此痛快。这青春难耐，可无法按耐。这暗夜太白，照出了悲哀。这爱情如戏，生出些意外。